And welcome everyone to God's Views on Political News. This is where we tell you what the news is and politics are, but we also tell you what God's views are on those things that are happening today. We're so glad that you could be with us. My co-host Bill Cloud is here. Bill, good morning, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Two different time zones here, and I'm sure everybody joining us are in different time zone as well.
So what's the temperature there in San Diego today?
Perfect, as always.
As always, yes. Yes.
How about where you are?
88 and 1,010% humidity today. So
and it's just that way just for you, I'm sure.
Just for me, yes.
Just get the yard work done before it turns 100. Okay, so let's start out. I tell you, Bill, I know this is something that's probably got to you, but it really got to me. I wanted to talk about Bernie Sanders, who, you just, I can see the expression on your face. It's not a good topic for you.
Well, when he came out, well, let's tell everybody what we're talking about. I'm sure they probably know.
They probably know, but it's been pretty quiet in the news, so you maybe want to tell us all.
Well, the man who was up for a position, and my mind just went blank, so maybe you can fill in the blank where his name is. I can't remember it right now. But who was for a judicial position, right? He was.
Oh, you mean Bernie Sanders when he was
interrogating this guy and questioning?
Yeah. It was one of Donald Trump's appointees,
right?
And Russell Vogt.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Bernie Sanders is on this committee and gets to ask him questions, I guess, to see where he stands on different positions, and basically rake this guy over the coals because he is ready for it, a Christian, and that he actually believes what the Bible says.
And Bill, let me give a little bit of background on why he got to that point and why he was questioning him. Were you going to talk about?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So Russell was working at this school or college about
Wheaton
a year
College.
before. Wheaton College, which is a Christian school.
Right.
And a teacher there had been fired because of a Facebook post. And the Facebook post was basically sort of to show solidarity to Muslims. And that person got fired because they made some allegations that were, anti-Christian, and that person got fired. And Russell Vogt wrote the article about that and said, let me see if I can find the words, basically saying that that Muslims and Christians don't worship the same God, and said that Muslims have a deficient theology and they don't know God because they rejected Jesus Christ, his son, and that they stand condemned. So that really got Bernie all upset.
Well, the issue here is, at least as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Vogt, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Actually believes what the Bible says. He's not playing this coexist, social justice, let's all be tolerant game. The political correctness, that we are just inundated with every day. So he actually apparently believes what the Bible says. So the last time I looked, it was okay for me living in the United States of America to believe whatever I want to believe, and then stand true to that, and then be vocal about what I believe. Even if it ruffles the feathers of the likes of Bernie Sanders. And so, you're the legal expert of the two. So don't I have the right to believe what I want to believe? Don't I have the right in this country to say what I want to say as it relates to my beliefs? As long as it's not going to injure anyone or, cause them any physical harm, I should be able to do that. And so this gentleman is actually advocating or presenting a case that is of sound biblical doctrine. So for Bernie Sanders, a senator in the United States Senate, to say that this man should be disqualified from public service because he actually believes what the Bible says is it's maddening to me. It is absolutely maddening. And he's not supposed to apply any kind of religious test, as I understand it, for political appointees. They can be Christians. They're very much entitled to be Christians and to espouse that belief. And so for him to apply this religious test is not only wrong, as I understand it, constitutionally, but get the irony of this. He's saying that it's not good for this country, for someone who actually believes the Bible and who espouses Christian beliefs, it's not good for them to be in public service. But a socialist, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump away from a communist, it's okay for them to be a public servant in a constitutional republic, in the United States Senate, no less. That is making me crazy. And compound it with the fact that, at least as far as I can tell, nobody in the U.S. Senate, nobody in the Congress, nobody on the federal level is raising Cain with Bernie Sanders about doing this kind of nonsense. So this is one of those things that gets me passionate, gets me angry. And, I was tempted to tweet out that if Bernie doesn't change his position, he might feel the burn. But, that would be a little over the top, perhaps.
Well, and here's, let me just say what I want to say, because this really upsets me as well. You're right about the Constitution, Article 6 of the Constitution. Let me see if I can read it to you. It says that no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. So right then there and of itself, Bernie had no right to kind of question his religious principles. Bernie's just saying, well, but I'm just asking, there are other people who aren't Christian. So are you going to, not treat them fairly? Because if you're a Christian, right, we can't really treat other people fairly. We have to condemn every religion. We can't treat people fairly. And so therefore that's why we shouldn't serve in public office. What Bernie what I think he was all hung up on is, number one, when people start going towards communism, Bill, as you know, that means that there is no God. Most communists are atheists, and they would agree with that there is no God. And so Bernie's letting his own philosophy, if you will, or religious beliefs come forth, or lack thereof. And he wants to attack this man because he believes in God. He believes that there is God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that we're not serving the same God. Now, does that mean that he's unqualified, to serve in that position? And I think what Mr. Vogt said makes it very reasonable. Although we don't have the same beliefs, that we are supposed to respect and show dignity and respect towards individuals. Doesn't mean that we have to believe their religion. But what really gets me, and it also doesn't mean that we're unfair when we're not of the same religion towards that other person. But I didn't hear Bernie, ask it. Would he have asked the same question of a Muslim who was sitting there running for office? Would he have talked about his religious beliefs? Would he have asked, well, let me ask you some questions about the Quran. Now it says here that you're supposed to kill infidels. Does that mean you don't respect other religions? I don't think we would have had the same questions.
We would not. We would not. And
exactly.
Let's not make it a Muslim. Let's make it an atheist.
Yeah.
Are you going to let your atheism influence how you treat people who are devout Christians or Muslims or Jews or what have you? So the fact that he is a devoted socialist, which is, as far as I'm concerned, a communist, not only does he not believe in God or does not acknowledge God, it also means that he doesn't really acknowledge the Constitution. He uses it to his advantage to advance his particular opinions and agendas, but he really doesn't have any respect for the Constitution either, or he would not have done what he did in that forum. So I wouldn't expect anything less from a Bernie Sanders, but I do expect more from those so-called conservative Republicans who are congressmen, who are senators, and why are they not speaking out against this? That's what drives me crazy, because this is what the left, this is what the adversary does. He steps in, he takes one or two steps in to see how far he can get. And every time we let this kind of thing slide, that's just a foothold. And he uses that foothold to advance on down the road. And so what we're seeing, Susan, unless it's stamped out, and I really don't have a reason to believe it will be right now, but unless it's stamped out and we put a stop to it, then we're seeing the beginning of true persecution in this country. Because if they can eradicate Christianity from public service,
it's over.
It's over.
Yeah, it's over. And I think, this is just another example of what progressives, socialists, communists, whatever the word that you want to use, is what they do. They would not allow for you to say, but wait, the Constitution says that you're not supposed to ask these questions, Bernie, that it's not supposed to matter. But, and they would be the first to tell you, the Constitution is outdated. We shouldn't even be looking at the Constitution anymore. It's so old. We should make up new rules. But when they want to use it, they certainly know how to use it. And then they could come out and use it against you. And he also knew that by asking, questions about Christianity, just what you said, Bill, that nobody's going to come out and say anything against it. Nobody's going to come out from conservatives and say, how dare you ask those questions, Bernie? You know that they're wrong. You know that under the Constitution, you shouldn't be asking things like that. You can ask him, are you fair to people? Will you be fair? But bringing his religion into it was absolutely intentional.
Yeah, and again, he's established a beachhead, so to speak. Yeah. And there's going to be reinforcements coming behind him. It's just like this. I read just the other day how yet again the Freedom from Religion Foundation is trying to shut down a particular school board from allowing God to be mentioned in a baccalaureate service. I mean, Think about what I'm saying. Yeah. A baccalaureate is always in a church. Is always a Christian themed event for graduates. And they're trying to shut things like that down. And it's time somebody stands up and in a legal, ethical, civil way, make sure I get that in, fight back.
And righteous way.
Right, yes, and fight back. You don't continue giving the bully your lunch money.
Yeah.
At some point in time, you've got to smack him in the nose.
And I have to say, and I know I always bring this up, and I know sometimes we have people on the left that are listening to this, but everybody knows that I'm a conservative, I'm on the right. So, but what I'm going to say is that we did this for 8 years under the Obama administration. That we had our president at the time come out and say that this country was founded on Islam as well as Judeo-Christian principles. And we didn't speak up then. Yeah. And for 8 years, we kept going with just chipping away a little bit more and a little bit more. And as you said, where is it? Do we say enough is enough? Where is it? Do we start calling Bernie Sanders' office? What do we do? How do we, the thing that I've noticed, Bill, that everybody on the left is much more organized than we are on the right. And they may hate each other, but they get along for that purpose.
Well, it's kind of like all the Muslim countries in the world. They'll fight amongst themselves. They'll kill one another if given the opportunity, especially Sunnis and Shia. But the one thing they can come together on and unite behind is their disdain and hatred for Israel.
Yeah. Kind
of the same principle here. These people on the left can maybe hate one another and, they'll chew one another out and spit, but when it comes to people like you and me, they can always find ways to come together. We're the ones that can't seem to get our act together. I mean, and we can look at this on several levels. The Republicans have been saying for how many years now, if we can get the Congress, if we can get the Senate, if we get the White House, we'll do this, we'll do that. What's happening? Nothing, Yeah. So where people who truly believe the Bible and who are still believing that this country means something and stands for something, as long as we are under God, then we need to, and as you put it, in a righteous way, and in a civil way, in an ethical way, we need to quit buying into the mindset that, oh, well, we just can't talk about these kinds of things in certain venues. Oh, we can't have a baccalaureate service and mention God, for Pete's sake. Or we can't even have a graduation ceremony in a public setting and the valedictorian give thanks to God, because that's unlawful. We got to quit buying into this nonsense and start fighting back.
Yeah. Or we can't even kneel down before an athletic event at a school and say a prayer because somehow that is unlawful, or.
Yeah, and you saying that reminds me of something that happened to me personally about 3 years ago. My family and I were visiting Washington, D.C., and we're taking the kids around to the different sites and things and the landmarks, and we actually sat in on a Senate session. Heard Ted Cruz give a very rousing speech, and so it was very educational, very inspiring. But we're in the rotunda of the Capitol building, and there is a painting that depicts the Pilgrims when they first came to North America, and they're all bowing on their knees, thanking God for safe delivery. All right, so here's what I did. I wanted to get a picture of this picture. I got down on my knee so I could get a better camera angle. Right. I'm not praying or anything like that. I just got down on my knee to take a picture of the Pilgrims pray. Somebody with the Capitol Police comes over and says, "Sir, you're going to have to stand up. There's no kneeling allowed in here." And I said, "What do you mean there's no kneeling allowed?" "Well, it's considered a form of protest and prayer, and so you can't kneel." And I so get the irony. In the Capitol Rotunda, I was not allowed to kneel to take a picture of people kneeling in thanks to God. Unbelievable.
Doesn't it sound a little bit like in Israel, where you're not allowed to pray, and the Muslims there won't allow you? Can you tell me a little bit about
the Temple Mount?
Yeah,
which a place I've been to several times actually, and another personal experience. The first time that I went up on the Temple Mount, let me back up. For those who may not know, in 1967, which, by the way, this is the 50th anniversary of the taking of the old city of Jerusalem and the reunification of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. This month and years marks 50 years. Soon after the Israelis took the Temple Mount, the political decision was made, and as I understand it, Moshe Dayan is the one who really pushed for this, to kind of soothe the hostilities with the Muslim world, decided to give jurisdiction of the Temple Mount back over to the Muslims. Since that time, anyone other than Muslim is not allowed to go to the Temple Mount and pray. A Jew cannot go on top of the Temple Mount and pray. A Christian cannot go on top of the Temple Mount and openly pray. So the very first time that I went there, this would be 20 some odd years ago, we went up there and we our little group convened around a little dome that was up there. And there were these Muslim police that were just standing all around us. We couldn't open our Bible. And so what we did was we prayed, but we did it with our eyes open, kind of looking around at one another, not like we would, you would imagine somebody, how they would look while praying. But this is the only way you could get away with it. And anytime anyone tries to pray, anyone tries to go up there and read a Bible verse, I don't know if you remember when Ariel Sharon went up there several years ago, and there was a big brouhaha over that. Well, it's like they're so afraid of somebody praying. So in what is considered to be the holiest site on the face of the earth, the irony is that people who actually believe in the God who sanctified that place aren't allowed to pray with him. Now, mind you, I think he hears my prayers wherever I'm at.
Exactly.
Okay? I don't have to be at the Western Wall for him to hear me pray. But it's just the irony of it. And you know what? That's what that says then to me, Susan, is that the adversary and those through who he works, what he does is he tries to seize the very ground that God has sanctified that is supposed to be worshiped, where he is to be worshiped. He doesn't want that going on. He's so zealous and jealous to make sure that doesn't happen. He works through people like, in this particular case, the Muslim police, but in our case, the Capitol Police, a place that is where our legislators go to draft laws that are to protect our God-given rights. And it was in that very place that a God-given right was denied me. I had to make a choice. Am I going to stand and take the picture, or am I going to go to jail? You know? And I'm getting to the point that there are some things worth going to jail over.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. It is amazing that we have come to this point, that in the country that was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, in a country that is free, that we even have these conversations about,
Yes.
well, you can't pray there, or are you really going to be fair to other people if you take this position that Donald Trump has appointed you to? It's craziness. And again, I think, as you said, we've just keep slipping down that slippery slope because we've had 8 years of programming, if you will, to be tolerant. And the opinion of those on the left, tolerant means give up your rights for somebody else's right. That's their definition of tolerance.
Well, and this is a concept that we see throughout the Bible. It's not just a political thing here. The political thing is a reflection of the spiritual thing. And as long as the wheat is willing to coexist with the tares on their terms, then what the tares intend to do is to steal the nutrients from the ground, kill the wheat, destroy the whole idea of, what the owner of the field had in mind in the first place. And so the left, by and large, I'm sure there are exceptions to this rule, but the left, by and large, they don't have any interest in coexisting with me. They want me to be tolerant of their views long enough for their views to gain a beachhead so that they can strengthen their position and take another piece of ground and another piece of ground until they wipe me, you, our way of thinking, our way of living from the landscape, which, by the way, mirrors what the Muslim world wishes to do with Israel.
Right. I know.
They don't want peace. They just want a piece of ground in order to get another piece of ground and drive Israel into the sea.
Yeah. And the left, they believe that their way of looking at things is correct. And therefore you are to be tolerant, meaning you are to be accepting of the way that they look at everything. And then you give up what it is that you believe in. And that's exactly how it's gone. It's been, I say the last 8 years, it was more intense over the last 8 years, but this has been the philosophy of communists and progressives since they began, at least back in the early 1900s, where they really started getting a foothold. So it's nothing new. And you can see these, how crazy things are. And Marlene in our comment section is saying the whole world, not just Israel, this happening in the whole world, where this past weekend we had an anti-Sharia law protest, right? And we actually had people out there who were on the other side, who were saying that this is the way it should be. And it's amazing to think that there are people on the other side who believe that women are not even second-class citizens, are lower than that people should be killed, that women should be told what to do. I mean, on and on and on, the way Sharia law goes. And yet, what I would like to see, honestly, I would like to see the pro-Christian protests each week. But I'll tell you what will happen if you have that. You will have the other side saying, look at those hypocrites, look at those bigots, look at those horrible people. And that's the way it'll be.
Yeah, or they'll throw urine on somebody.
Exactly.
Or, come up and punch them or something, as, this is what's been going on the last few days. To kind of boil this down to, in my mind, it has to be that believers, not just conservatives, okay, but believers, believers, by the way, should be conservatives as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. But believers need to stand up and say no. It reminds me of back when Ronald Reagan was the president, and I'd heard Michael Reagan tell the story of how that one of the reasons Reagan wanted to be president is because he wanted to sit down across from the Soviets, who had been saying, we want this, we want that. And, all these administrations had been conceding to the Russians, hoping, to strike some conciliatory tone with them, and had given away all these concessions. And Reagan said one of the reasons he wanted to be president was to sit across from the Soviets, and when they start making all their demands, that he'd be able to just say, "Niet." No.
Yeah.
Because they weren't used to hearing that. And if you'll remember when Reagan met Gorbachev in, in Iceland, Reykjavik, and they had those meetings, and the Soviets were making all these demands, and finally Reagan just said no, told his staff, we're out of here. That's what we need to do. We need to just start saying no.
Yeah.
No. You want to live that life? Okay, that's your business. But I'm not going to concede ground to you. I'm not going to say that it's acceptable. I'm not going to say that it's equal. I'm not going to say that it's moral, because it's not. No. Because the left is like a bunch of spoiled, rotten brats who are accustomed to getting their way. And we on the other side are like the parent who just keep enabling them to do this. We just keep allowing this stuff to go on. And it's time that we just say no. And if need be, in a metaphorical way, take them out to the woodshed.
Right. Well, and one of the comments saying people just think Christians should be doormats, and really, the Christians should be doormats and be quiet. Don't speak up.
Some Christians think that.
I know. And part of the problem that we have, with what you're talking about, we have not only the left working against us, but we have those people, let's say, in our government and in our churches and other higher positions, I guess you would say, who are working against us also, who are saying, you should just be coexisting. And therefore, we've got all of these people coming against us. And sometimes I think for Christians, it seems overwhelming. And they think, well, I'm just going to go and I'm just going to go pray. And that's all I need to do. And while that is a big part of what you need to do, I think people, just like you said, you need to rise up. You need to be out front. You need to show people, our country was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. We need to remind people of that. We need to remind people what that means. We need to model for the world what that means to be Christians and live by biblical principles.
Well, for starters, it might do some Christians a lot of good to go watch Braveheart.
Yes. Definitely.
Because, and I'm not being funny here. I'm being dead serious.
Yeah.
Because it conveys the idea and what can happen when one person stands up and says, that's enough. Mm-hmm. That's enough. And again, I'm not endorsing being violent or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But I am very much saying we need to stand up and say no. No, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to concede ground anymore. It's kind of reminiscent of the story of Hanukkah. Same thing was happening, over 2,000 years ago in Israel. Things were being forced down people's throat. And finally, someone stood up and said, you know what? That's enough. That's it. Yeah. No, we're not going to do this anymore. And when a few people stood up, then more people stood up, and then more after that. And before you know it, there's this groundswell of support. And what they found was there are more of us than there are of them. There are more of us than there are more of them. Yeah. And if we could ever lock into that and embrace that, then the left and the progressives and the socialists and the communists and the anarchists and the antifas, all these people lose their power because they have somehow or another convinced us there's more of them than there are of us.
Well, and we keep, you can hear these people make the argument towards Christians. You're supposed to be giving and forgiving and turn the other cheek. And Christians are like, oh, you're so right. So I'm going to go back in my closet over here and just do that. I'll just be forgiving and all that. We've forgotten what it means. We've forgotten how Jesus reacted to certain things that were anti-Christian, that were anti-Jesus, anti-people. We're not doing what Jesus did.
Well, first of all, I would make the argument that when the context of that statement he made about turning the other cheek is a different context than what we're talking about today. Secondly, I would also argue this. I only have two cheeks.
Yeah.
You know, there are things that God says that are not to be encroached upon. And those things that are holy, those things that are sacred, those are things that we are supposed to defend. Those are things that we are supposed to be willing to fight for. Because it's going to boil down to this. Who am I more willing to offend? God or those people over there that have convinced me I need to, just bow down and be a doormat? Who am I going to be willing to offend? And let this sink in. Then who am I going to have to stand and give an account to? It's not going to be them.
Well, in my opinion, and I kind of get on the church every now and then, but I think the church should be out there leading us in this type of thing to get us out into the public again and to get our stronghold back. Every church around this, every Christian church should be out there saying, this is what we need to do. We need to stand up, Christians, because things are happening. But I think they're being deceived. They don't want to see that.
This is kind of an apples and oranges comparison, but in my mind, it's linked. The civil rights movement of the 60s, when it was truly for civil rights.
Yeah.
There were people who were willing to go to jail for what they believed to be just and righteous. They were willing to suffer. Okay. Yeah. Our problem today is very few people are willing to go to that extreme. They're not willing to go that far. And here is our downfall, because that's exactly what we're called to do. Messiah said, if you're going to be my disciples, you're going to have to take up your cross and follow me. What does that mean? You're going to have to be willing to die. Now, not necessarily physically, but die to you, everything you want, everything you desire, what your will is. And I just don't think we're there yet. That's where we got to get to.
We do have to get there. And I think also one of the things that the problem that we have is that we teach our children, and a lot of us in older people, adults are looking at things that I'm right here in the here and now. I'm not worried about tomorrow. I'm not worried about standing before God. It doesn't enter their minds. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And maybe that is a lesson for us to know that if you're thinking that, then you're not as close to God as you should be. That you should be spending more time focused on what's really important, and that's God.
Let me speak to that with something that comes from the scripture. It's a parable that Messiah gives us about a man whose everything's going well for him. In fact, it's going so well, he's thinking, man, I got to build some bigger barns. I've got so much coming in. I got to build bigger barns, so I can store all this stuff I got. And then God speaks to him and says, you're a fool, because you haven't even considered that tonight you're going to die. Wow. And so the point is that we can get so focused on the here and now. Not that we shouldn't to some degree, but we always have to have an eye to the future. We always have to, and more importantly, we always have to have an eye to where God is leading us, whether as an individual, a family, or a nation. And if we don't, we are going to pay the price. You said something a moment ago, it triggered this thought, and I want to go back to it if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. And that is that, we end up not only fighting the progressives, but we end up fighting these Christians who have, been taken in by this idea we have to be a doormat. Again, apples and oranges, but that is, as I see it, one of the biggest challenges that the Trump administration is facing right now is they're not only having to contend with all of the liberals and the Democrats who are fighting them tooth and nail at every turn. I read yesterday that for the first time, Trump sat down with his full cabinet yesterday. Yeah, right. Unbelievable. Yeah. But he's not only having to contend with them, he's having to contend with the likes of John McCain, who just come out and said that we were under better leadership with the Obama administration. I mean, give me a break. As you know, I'm cautious where Trump is concerned, But better leadership with the Obama administration, unbelievable. So this is what we're up against.
That's what we're up against. And, the sad thing is we're up against people who are Republicans. They say they're Republicans, but they're really not. They're really Democrats. So they're Democrats in Republican clothing. And I think in the same time, we get people who say they're Christian, but they're really not. They on the outside, they pretend to be. And that's what we're coming against. And a lot of times people today, they don't know what's real. They don't know who they can trust. They don't, there's a lot of question about everything and everybody. And I think it really does cause people to start doubting, not doubting God so much, but it's like, well, who do I trust? Who do I turn to? And when you see all of these things, when you hear John McCain say, that's crazy that he's saying that. But then you start thinking, well, what's going on? What do I do? And that's even more reason, again, to turn to God and focus on God and get grounded again because of what's coming, because of things what Bernie Sanders says, because of the persecution that's coming for Christians and them getting more and more of a stronghold. You have to be focused on God and get back to doing what you came here to do. And that was to be Christ-like, to do what Christ did. And we're not, I don't think, myself included, we're not doing all that we should be doing what Christ told us to come here and do.
Well, and it all starts with me and recognizing that I need to adjust, I need to change, I need to die to myself. We're told that if a man seeks to save his life, he's going to lose it. But if a man or woman who for my sake, he says, loses his life, he'll find it. And so we have to quit thinking with the temporal mindset, And let me interject this. We're talking about politics and all the things that are going on in our country and the aggravation and the frustration we feel about those things. And I think this is very important for people to take away, that God's views on this is that we don't win this battle through political means exclusively. Because it's really, and you said this at the very beginning, it's really more than a political issue. It's a spiritual issue. We're in a spiritual battle. So you can only fight a spiritual battle through spiritual means. Paul told us we're not warring against flesh and blood, even though we have to face those flesh and blood things. That's not really what we're warring against here. We're warring against spirits, principalities. We're warring against the adversary. And if conservatives in this country truly want their country back, the first thing they've got to learn and then embrace and follow through on is we got to turn back to the one who made this country great in the first place. Because if we don't do that, there won't be a country to save.
Well, and I look at some things that are recently happening too, and I can tell that, at least what I'm looking at is not godlike. For example, there's a play in New York about Julius
Just thinking
Caesar.
about that. Yes, just thinking about that. Yeah.
And basically here we have a character. It's supposed to be Julius Caesar, but it's Donald Trump. And this person in the play is assassinated. Now, this carries over from, the Kathy Griffin, the bloodied head of Donald Trump that she's carrying around. And these people feeling that there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. The people in the New York play were so upset because Delta Airlines and Bank of America decided to pull out because they didn't want to be sponsors anymore. And now the people on the left are saying, really, you're pulling out of this great and wonderful play of the assassination of Donald Trump that we're depicting here? Well, now we want you to be boycotted. I mean, how upside down is all of that?
Isaiah 5, they call good evil and evil good. They exchange light for darkness, bitter for sweet. It's going on all the time. But here is one thing we need to just really drive home every opportunity we get. That play and the way they portrayed Julius Caesar, and even there was it? I forgot the female role who had a Slavic accent in this particular play. Like really, we know what you're doing. That's the left. That's the progressive. That's the tear. It's not concealing what it is anymore. It's showing you plainly what it is. They don't want to tolerate you. They want to destroy you. They don't want to coexist with you. They want you to go away. This is really what they're about. And if they can take a severed dummy head of the president and people be okay with that. And I realized that there were some people who feigned disgust and disdain, but privately they were all for it.
Yeah.
They've already proven that as far as I'm concerned. And then when you can have Julius Caesar be, resemble the president of the United States and be assassinated, you're just fantasizing about what you'd really like to see happen. That's who these people are. And that's who we want to coexist with. That's who we want to concede ground to. We're signing our own death warrant when we do. So why isn't the Secret Service checking into that? It's not a veiled threat. It's a threat. And these people who are going to boycott Delta Airlines and Bank of America, by the way, I was shocked that they actually pulled their sponsorship from.
I was too. Yeah.
Credit where credit is due. But now they're going to boycott these companies, and they probably will. And so it'll be interesting to see what Delta and Bank of America decide to do with that boycott, or when this boycott comes about, if it materializes into anything. But this is who they are. Why would we, who are believers anyway, want to coexist with that? Now, should we be the light to them? Yes. But we can't be the light to them if we're trying to act like them or get them to like us. Won't work.
Well, and I think there's a group. I think it's called Conservative Research Media. I'm hoping I got that name correct. But they are starting to come out and say we're going to watch what's going on. We're especially watching the media, and we're going to start getting to their advertisers. And I would bet that some of the same people were responsible for going to Delta and Bank of America and saying, we're going to stop. We're going to stop using your products. We're going to stop talking about you and advertising, promoting it, if you don't pull out of something like this. So I think there's this little tide that wants to come out, that wants to help, Christians, that want to get people back on the right track and do the right thing. And I have to give Donald Trump credit in this regard. He's been responsible for a lot of people starting to wake up, even Christians, waking up.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
because I would agree with that.
He's shown people, look, we have a deep, dark, and dark is the word I'm really trying to use here, deep, dark problem in our government, and it goes much deeper than that, and it's almost like he's opened up this cesspool. Because these people are just, rearing their ugly heads in all kinds of different inappropriate ways right now, because they're scared of losing control. And it's all about that. And so Christians are starting to see, you didn't realize, Christians, that this was underneath here and has been, bubbling around for the past 8+ years.
Or you stuck your head in the sand would probably be more appropriate. But go ahead, continue. I'm sorry.
But it's true. And now look at this. And everybody's sitting here all aghast. But this went on and had 8 years to fester in the darkness, unfeathered by anybody.
Well, I want to go back to something I said earlier. There are more of us than there are of them. And I can prove that biblically. Because every time the adversary tried, through Pharaoh or through others, tried to bring God's people into slavery and bondage and oppression, they always made this observation. There are more of them than there are of us, always, without fail. When Elijah was, freaked out because he thought Jezebel's going to kill him and I'm the only one that's left, God spoke to him and said, nope. I've got 7,000 more who've not yet bowed the knee to Baal. So we're not by ourselves. There are more of us than there are of them. And even if we were by ourselves, as believers, remember what we're told. Greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. So really, we're left without excuse. We see what's going on. We're aware of what's going on. We cannot rest on the fact that we believe that, our guy got elected, because the other side has not thrown up their hands and left the battlefield. They're still waging war at every turn, and they're good at it. And they're very good at it.
They're very good at it. I mean, and I think one of the biggest things that we're seeing right now is this whole thing with Comey and Mueller, the special prosecutor, and how that all came about. You know, if you want to look at the deceit that has been there that nobody recognized, that is coming out now in full force. Even how the special prosecutor, special counsel got appointed. You know, you look at that and you can see clearly, anybody that has their eyes even partially open can see that there's a conflict of interest between Mueller being appointed and Comey. They work together. They're friends since 2004. They've been described as brothers in arms, and yet we have this guy appointed to look for this. I mean, it's a witch hunt. There's nothing, not even a shred of evidence to show that there was collusion with the Russians and the Trump administration, that Trump was even under investigation. Comey even said that. And so yet we still keep this farce going because the left is hoping they can find something, anything.
Well, and I would add to that, Susan, there are many on the so-called right who are hoping they can find something. I think that, I think I said this earlier. If I didn't, I need to say it now. The Trump administration is having to fight not only the Democrats and the progressives, but also many within the Republican Party who would love to see Trump gone. They despise him as much as anyone. Yeah. So the Comey-Mueller, association, I'll be honest with you, other than what you've said and the little bit I've read, I don't really know a lot about it. But if the Democrats and many of these Republicans were all for it, something smells as far as I'm concerned. Comey wasn't really on my radar until the whole, looking into the email, Hillary's emails and all that. And, and I don't know all the legal aspects of it, but I'm just a common sense guy. If anyone else would have gone to jail, no questions asked, because of allowing this kind of confidential and top secret information, classified information, getting into the hands of people, or even if the potential was there, if they would have gone to prison with no questions asked, for him to come out and play judge and jury and decide that she, is not going to be prosecuted, not even going to be, it's not even going to go before a trial or anything, that smacked of collusion as far as I'm concerned. And so at that point in time, in my mind, this was a corrupt man, or at least, at the very least, a man whose integrity could be swayed depending on the political winds.
Well, yeah, when you couple that with the fact that he was talking about how he had conversations with the former Attorney General Lynch, and she was saying, don't call this an investigation with Hillary, call it a matter. When he had found supposedly, or had been told, or had a memo that said that Lynch said she wasn't going to go deeply into any investigation with Hillary. I mean, it's all insanity. And when you find out now, I mean, the conflict just keeps going, because Mueller is now hiring attorneys that have donated to the Clinton campaign. And again, as you said, Republicans as well as Democrats, nobody's voicing an opinion. Nobody is saying there's something inherently wrong with this. We just keep allowing it to go. And I encourage people on my show today, on an earlier show that I had, to contact the DOJ, Rosenstein, who's the deputy DOJ, and say, stop this. Remove Mueller now. We don't need an investigation. Comey has already said the president wasn't under an investigation, and there's no obstruction of justice by the president. It's clear that this is purely a witch hunt, and you're using our taxpayer dollars to appease those on the left. And it's ridiculous. It's a farce, and it is a witch hunt to get this president out of office for anything that they could possibly overturn.
Well, here's what I'm going to say to this. And again, speaking to the believers.
Right.
If President Trump is innocent of any of this. And from what we can make out, there doesn't seem to be any evidence of that. I tend to agree. It's probably trying to make something out of nothing. And if that is so, then we need to pray this, that Mueller and Comey and whoever else might be involved with an attempt to take down the president, if that's what they're trying to do, that the gallows they're building for Trump, so to speak,
right,
that they will be hung upon their own gallows. And I'm saying that based on the story in the book of Esther, because there was this wicked man who used political position to craft a plot and hatch a plot to try to destroy another person who had a political position because of jealousy. And so he plotted, they cast lots on a day that they're going to try to destroy God's people, and they built gallows for God's people to be hung upon. Well, when it come time, the plot was exposed, and the people who built the gallows were hung on those very gallows. And so God turned it around on them. So that's what we need to do, Susan, as believers. We need to pray. If there is something evil and wicked going on here, if that is the objective, to destroy someone for something they haven't done, to simply remove them from office, then we need to pray that the gallows they're constructing, or in this case, the investigation that they're putting together, will be the very thing that hangs them. That's what we can pray.
Yeah, and I think, I agree with you in some ways, and I see some things that are coming out that never would have come out before because of, just pointing fingers at Donald Trump. We're starting to uncover things. We're starting to see things. I mean, again, a perfect example. Nobody knew how weak of a man that Comey, the former FBI director, was. Nobody knew that. And his own words that, if I were just stronger, I could have told the president no, or, whatever the case may be. This is the man that is leading the FBI, and you can't talk to the president, and you go to,
and you're 6'8",
and you're 6'8", and you tower over everyone, including the president. And yet you can go to Attorney General Lynch and have a conversation where she tells you, don't go out there in public and call it an investigation. Go out there and call it a matter. And you go and you leave the room and you do exactly what she tells you to do. So, but it's exposing the deceit and the lies and the potential criminality of these people and how they are working together and how they have, did you forget your soul? Did you lose your soul in the past 8, 10, 12 years? Is that what happened? Did you forget who you serve? And it's not President Obama and it's not President Trump or anybody else. It sounds certainly like they did, or maybe they never had it in the first place.
Well, I think we know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
There are precious few public servants anymore. There are self-serving people, and that's just human nature. I mean, we shouldn't really be shocked at that. But when God gets involved in something, one group and one side thinks this is what we're going to do. Here's our plan. We have our agenda. But if someone is innocent and someone is just, and if we as God's people are praying that the wickedness and those things that are hatched in secret rooms and dark places, if those things if we pray that they be exposed, then I believe that could come out of this. And that's kind of what I've had in my mind since this all came about. Look, my position is if Trump or anyone in Trump's team was colluding with the Russian, you know what? I hope that comes out and I hope it's dealt with, because what we don't want to do is to wink at one thing while we're focusing on something else. But if it is as it seems that this is just a witch hunt, this is just trying to find something on him, it's not there, and all the same time ignoring what happened in Benghazi and what happened with the emails and all these, and Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton on a tarmac in Arizona, ignoring all of that, then I'm going to pray that this investigation, it will become impossible for those investigating it to ignore it. And that might be the very thing that brings their downfall.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, and I think it's also, lately we've been looking at the court system and understanding how the court system is trying to control the powers of the president and disregarding the lives of Americans here in the United States. We just recently had the Ninth Circuit. No, just having the Ninth Circuit, who basically went against the executive order once again after it was sort of redesigned the way it appeared that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals wanted it, and still they deny the travel restrictions that Trump wanted.
And because why? I mean, obviously, it was not legalities that they were making this ruling based on. It was their positions, their agenda, their feelings, and so if it isn't clear to people by now, I don't know how it could be made any more clear.
Yeah. But I mean, it's amazing. Look at that. We talked about before, how many factions are coming against this president. You have the court system. You have this special prosecutor, assigned by the DOJ. You have the entire left coming after this president. You have Maxine Waters out there saying he ought to be impeached, but with absolutely no evidence. You have Nancy Pelosi, who comes out as much as she can, talking down about the president and everyone else.
When she can remember his name.
When she can remember his name on a good day.
Yeah.
And then you have also the Republicans, the rhinos, who don't come out and support this president, who say what they can. It is amazing that we see all of that, and that what people need to remember, what Christians also need to remember, is this isn't just against our president. It is against our way of life. It is against our beliefs and everything that we hold dear in God and in America. That's who those people are coming against: our own culture, our way of life, and our God.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to add to that. That's just a true statement. I know that some people think, well, I'm not going to get involved with this, that, and the other, because it's all going to work out in the end. God's going to work it out. Sometimes I think God's going to sit back and say, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. I've given you, he gave Adam a garden. God could have took care of the garden, but he gave Adam the garden to take care of it. And if he doesn't take care of it, what will happen to it? Yeah. Same principle here. He gives us a country where we have these rights and we have these freedoms. We don't take care of it. We let the weeds grow in the garden instead. Well, the weeds are going to eventually take over. And if we don't decide, I need to do some weeding today, that's the inevitable is going to happen. And while we're sitting back waiting for God to do something, a lot of times God's sitting back saying, you do it.
Right.
I've already given you the responsibility.
And some of those people that are sitting back and not asking God, that's a problem. Because you need to ask God, what is it that you want me to do? Do you want me to go out there and protest, and my beliefs and tell people what I think? Do you want me to be the watchman? God calls us at times to be the watchman and to tell people, warn them about what's going on, to try to get them awake, to see what's happening, to try to let them know that your rights as a Christian are being impacted. Your rights in the American culture as to family and your way of life is being threatened. And if everybody sits back and nobody goes out there and does what God has called them to do, then where are we? We're in a lot of trouble.
Well, here's what we need to do. As I see it, 2 simple steps. Spend a lot of time in prayer to hear the voice of God. And then at every opportunity, speak audibly those things that you're hearing God speak to you. Because if we do that, if we hear the voice of God and we speak what God is saying, then we're going to speak the truth. And that is what's going to prevail, the truth.
And I agree with you absolutely. And a lot of people find, they'll say, well, I find it really difficult to speak up about God and to say things because I'm just not that type of person. I don't usually speak out. Well, you don't have to be that type of person. You just have to ask God to speak through you and to tell people what it is that he wants you to say. And again, that brings us right back to talking more and being more with God in the presence of God.
I think the one word that everybody could manage, in every situation or in those situations they find themselves in where they're having to speak the truth, one word they could learn is no. No.
That's the word for today. Bill's word for today is no. So
no, or
just
yeah,
remember that.
or whatever.
However you want to say it. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here today. It's been a pleasure. Until next week, God bless you and take care, and we'll see you again next week.